Okay, so we have the torso and the pelvis more or less prepped out, ready to go. And I did mention that I have kind of skewed this from left to right. So if we did go into the side view and we x-ray the geo, we can see, we really shouldn't see these other edges, which means I'm looking at the opposite side of the character, and that means that the left side and the right side aren't the same, which isn't the case. Normally, we want to have the character symmetrical across the left and right sides, so that tells me he's not. And the same for this border here. So I kept saying don't worry about it because of the next step we're going to do, which is we're going to proxy him. So in the front view, make sure your back face culling is off. So if I had it on, I wouldn't see anything through his little neck hole here. I do see the black faces, so I know I'm ready to go. And I'm going to right mouse click, go down to face, and I'm going to carefully marquee everything on the character's right side. Delete it. Okay, so now I got half the character. I'm going to hide the reference for a minute and bring back the grid. And what we need to make sure of is that this border edge here, this thicker edge that I have, if we look at it in perspective, I need to make sure that this border edge is absolutely straight. So not the collar, but the ones right on the border. And straight and snapped to or aligned with this yellow line, that vertical line, the YZ plane. So to facilitate that, I'm going to just go and grab all the verts carefully in this half of Homer. And I'm holding down Control and Shift and marqueing over stuff that I already selected. I did explain that a while ago. So Shift is a toggle select. If things are off or unselected, it will select them, and things that are selected, it will deselect. If you want to make sure that you're only adding to the selection set, you use Shift and Control, and it will not remove any of the verts that are already selected. So I use that a lot. So Shift Control and then marquee, and you won't remove any verts that you already have selected. Okay, so I've selected the border edge. I want to bring up my move tool, and I'm going to check two things. First of all, for your snaps to work, your move tool has to be set to world space. So I can check that either by holding down W and left mouse clicking in the middle of my manipulator and making sure that it's set to world, and it is. I haven't been modeling in component or setting it to object. So world space it is, and that ensures that the snap will work. And then I'm going to go into my tool settings. So if you have your toolbox still open, you could double click the move tool and it will open up the tool settings, or you can just hit this button right here, show hide tool settings. It'll open it docked. You can tear it off, move it over, do whatever you need to do. So again, here I can set the orientation to world, and what I need to do is under my move snap settings, this retain component spacing option needs to be off. And right now it's on, it's checked on, so I'm going to uncheck it, turn it off. If that is on, it won't align the verts. It will snap them, sure, but it won't actually line them up perfectly to each other. So that should be off 99.99999% of the time, and somehow it's still on as a default. So once I've turned it off, it's off. Good, so now I'm ready to do my snapping. So I'll bring back my grid. I'll hold down X, which is snap to grid. And I'm going to grab the red arrow, which is the x-axis, and I'm just going to drag it back and bring it forward. And that should align all of the verts, so they're all lined up, and all of them are individually snapped to this edge. So if I undo that Z, you can see how right here specifically it wasn't straight, and now I redo, and now they're straight. So they're perfectly straight, and they're lined up to this YZ plane axis. So I'm good to go. So back to object mode. And I'll just go into perspective for this, and we are ready to do our proxy. So we go to the mesh menu, very last command, smooth proxy. I'm going to go to where it says subdiv proxy, and I need the options. I'm going to make this a little longer so I can see the options. Well, they might not fit in this window. And we can ignore this upper portion. It doesn't really matter for what we're doing, but I am going to scroll down slightly because the mirror behavior here is important. Right now it's set to none. I need half. I have half the character. I only need to get the other half. And the other half happens to be the negative x half because this is the positive x side. So I want the negative x half. I want to keep the shader that's on this material for my proxy half. I don't want it to be transparent. I don't want to get it. I don't, nothing. Okay, so I'm keeping the shader that's here. And I'm going to put the smooth mesh in a layer. So it's going to be already assigned, so it just saves me a step. Maya is going to create the other half of the geometry, and it's going to create a display layer over here, and it's going to put that new piece of geometry in the display layer for me. By default, it wants to reference it, and I have to make some changes first. So I'm going to set it to normal, and then when I've made the changes, I will reference it by hitting the empty icon there until it goes R. Okay, so smooth. So there's the other half. So I have my wireframe unshaded on, that's why I see this purple mesh. Remember, anytime you see purple in Maya, it's telling you that there's a history connection between the object that's highlighted or selected and the one that goes purple. If you hide your wireframe unshaded, you won't see that. Okay. You also see that it's smoothed and there's more geometry. So if I bring in my wireframe unshaded again and look, it's got twice as much geometry. Well, 4 times as much actually. So twice in horizontal, twice in vertical. And that's not what I want either. I actually want to see my original mesh, the base mesh. So select your proxy, go into your channel box, go to where it says Polysmooth Proxy 1, and find the exponential level, which is just right there. And where it says 1, we don't want to smooth it 1 division. We want to smooth no divisions. So 0, enter, and you get your base mesh back. So the 0 level of your subdiv is your base mesh. So they look exactly the same, which at this stage is what I want. The other thing I want is, when I go into my side view, I want to be able to see through the geometry to the reference. So normally we would take the geo, torso geo, and we would x-ray it, control 0, and all of a sudden, bingo, I can't see anything. All I see is gray. And the reason for that is because what I'm actually doing is I'm seeing the inside of the proxy. This is a separate piece of geometry. It's just connected by history. So I can't see through this piece of geometry because I'm looking at the inner faces. Now, if I x-ray this, I find it super annoying. So if I go control 0 on that, it does x-ray. I can see through it in the side view, but I can't actually see it in any other view, and it's going to be in a reference layer, so I constantly have to unreference the layer, select the geometry, go to object mode, un-x-ray it, put it back in the, it's a nightmare to go back and forth. So I prefer to leave this proxy as hide opaque, but to be able to see through it, all I really need to do is backface call this, because Maya will not draw any of the faces where they can't see the normal. So if I hit my BC button, bingo, it goes transparent, but only in the side view, which is what I want. In the rest of the views, it's solid, so I can see what the surface looks like. Okay, so now that I have set the exponential level to 0, and I backface called the proxy half, I'm actually probably shouldn't name this, so it's just called torso geo 1, not useful. So this is going to be proxy geo, and I don't need the 1. And the layer is torso geo smooth mesh. Way too much text. This is going to be proxy underscore DL display layer, and save. And now I want to reference that layer because I don't want to move it. I don't want to model it. I don't want to do anything to it. It's just there to let me see the completed model, the full model, as I do my modeling on this half. Okay, so that's the proxy, and then let's just check the outliner. What it does is it creates this torso geo proxy, crazy amount of writing. So I'm just going to call this proxy underscore group. And inside the proxy group, we have the original torso geo and the proxy geo. Clean and simple, named, makes sense, it's all good. Okay? Right, so now we're ready to do, let's say, the arms. So I don't really have a reference for the length of his arms. What I might do is, before the next video, I might just take this reference into Photoshop and disconnect his arm and just drag it out so I have some guide, rough guide for the length of his arm. But for now, what I'll do is go to face mode. I'll select these 4 faces, which is where I want the arm to come out of. And let's go in the front view and just look. I'll bring back the reference image. It's pretty close, right? Not bad. Kind of shows the whole, it's actually a shirt sleeve, but whatever. And I'm going to do an extrude. So edit mesh, extrude, or control E. And again, I don't need to see this universal manipulator, so I'm just going to hit W. And if I crank that out, you can see what the proxy does is whatever I do on this side, Maya does on the other side. So now I can just crank this arm out, and if I had a guide for how long his arms need to be, I'd be all set. but I don't. So what I'll do is I'll maybe undo this. I'll go in and I'll edit the image and then bring it in, and I'll maybe throw it up on Blackboard, I guess, so that you can have it as well. And yeah, we'll give that a go. So let me just undo that. Z, Z, Z. Undo the extrude. Keep going. Make sure that it's undone. It is. And let's look at the leg instead. So let's tweak this out first. So vertex, grab it, and I can drag that down slightly. This one maybe can come over. This can come over, and that can kind of go up, and that can kind of go up. And these can come over. This can come over. Over. That can come down. Okay, so just a little bit of a tweak going on there. Let's make sure that this is smooth, the transition. We'll have to come back and fix that. But what I want to do is I want to grab the leg opening, which is right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it's a bit weird, but, and then let's extrude that and see what we get. So Control E, and again, I don't need that universal manipulator. So W, and I'll just drag that down. And you can see I'm getting the legs coming out. I want to stop about here because I actually want to flatten these faces. So there's a little trick I use. Just bring up the scale tool, grab the green box here, and if you drag that down and overlap it with the center, you'll see as you get closer and closer how the faces are flattening out, and that will make, it won't be exact, but it'll be pretty close, flat. And then I can do what I want with these. I can rotate them later or whatever I need to do or scale them or whatever to tweak those out. I'm actually going to leave them straight, I think. And I'm going to do another extrude. So G will allow me to do another one. W, drag it straight down. And we have a mild indication of maybe where his knees need to go. So I think what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take them right to the bottom. I'm going to rotate them. So E, flatten them out. And maybe just scale them up slightly so they're almost touching but not quite. And I know that they're not quite the right width, but we can adjust those later. And let's take them right down to the bottom where his shoes are going to come out. So it's kind of like we did with the torso. We just kind of cranked it right to the bottom, and then we inserted edge loops for the at the sides. So I'm going to do the same thing here. So that's going to be his legs. So I'm getting the length, and now I can use the Mesh Tools Insert Edge Loop. And I can go, well, that's about where his knees should go, so let's put one in about there. I can scale these out. This time I'm going to do a offset scale, and I'm actually going to go to vertex, and I'm going to grab these two verts, and I'm going to pull them out to kind of try and get that bulging, and do the same here. And I'm going to go to object mode. I'm going to X-ray him so I can see through. And I'm going to pull this one out because that's a silhouette. That was weird. Let's go back to X-ray mode. Control 0. Oh, I know what that is. There's something weird with the proxy and the update, the way Maya's updating the geo. If I move that, it turns off the surface. So that's going to be a bit awkward to work with. So I'm going to see if I can come up with something that maybe helps us out there. I'm going to insert a loop here, so edit mesh, insert edge loop, mesh tool, sorry. Stick one in about there, I'm guessing because I can't see through him, so maybe I'll just do a Alt-0, which X-rays my camera for now. R for scale, scale that in slightly, translate it over slightly, trying to get this cut in. And I think we've got about a 14-minute video already, so I'll leave that. I'll maybe adjust the image, and then for the next video we'll do something similar. We'll just pull out the arm to get the initial proportions, and then we can worry about tweaking later. Okay, so what you can't do now actually is well, let's try. I'm going to delete the history. So edit, delete by type, history. I think what it's going to do is it's going to break the connection. So let's just check that this still works. Oh yeah, so it still works. I was worried that it was going to break the history connection between my proxy and non-proxy half, but that's actually, it's not in my channel box anymore, but it still seems to work. So I think we'll live with that one. So I'm going to save this as 05 underscore legs.